Hello, everyone. Welcome to Solo Arts Heal. My name's Hannah, and I really want to introduce our guest for today, okay? Today, I have the privilege of speaking with John Bartlett, an acclaimed menswear and accessories designer whose journey has taken him from a high-paced world of fashion to a life rooted in healing, service, and creativity. A Harvard and Fashion Institute of Technology graduate, John is now a teacher, a nonprofit founder, a dedicated advocate for animals, and someone who's turned profound personal loss and recovery into purpose-driven work. From the quiet comfort of quilting to his work with women in recovery and individuals on the spectrum, John's story is one of transformation and deep compassion. John, hello. Thank you
Hi
for being
there. Can you hear
here. Hi. Yeah, I can hear you. Hello.
Hi.
Hello. How are you today? Thanks for
I'm
being
doing great.
here.
I'm doing great. It's so strange. Right as the I was being introduced, my computer died, and so now I'm on my phone. So I hope everybody can hear me okay. Uh,
Wow, that timing.
all
That timing. That is
about pivoting.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is totally fine. We're here to talk about you. And honestly, we have some pictures to show your work anyway. Oh, hey there you are. Hey,
There I
John.
am. Hi, everybody.
Um, well, thank you for being here again. Okay, we made it work. Can you please, I guess, just give us a brief timeline of maybe your history, okay? Um, short as you can, because I have a lot of
Sure.
questions for you, okay?
Okay, of course. I grew up in Ohio, in Cincinnati, and very sort of Midwestern type Brady Bunch type of upbringing. Not really raised to be creative, but I knew that that was a big part of who I was, a big part of my DNA. And had a very loving family, but not perfect. Certainly a lot of dysfunction and some alcoholism in the family. I moved to Cambridge, Mass, and went to Harvard undergrad, studied sociology, which really actually informed a lot of my work and continues to. And then from there, I moved to London for a minute, and that's when I decided that fashion was the medium that I really wanted to explore, and a medium that I felt would incorporate the sociology and all of the other things that I was interested in. And so I moved back to New York City at the age of 23 and started studying and working. And I've had a long career and many iterations, many different incarnations, ups and downs in the fashion industry. And then recently, in the last 5 years, I've moved into higher education, working with different colleges, teaching, running programs. And then all alongside of this, I've been very involved in animal advocacy. And we'll talk more about that, but that is a big
Sure.
life.
For sure. Okay. I find it so interesting that you went and you studied sociology and but you ended up becoming a fashion designer. So what is it that links the two? I'm curious about that.
Well, I think that all of us, so I grew up wearing a Catholic boys uniform, and
Mhm.
I always knew I was different. I came out of the closet as a gay man quite young at 17, but I always found clothing to be a means of expression and a means of disruption. And I felt that what we wear can also become a way of teaching people, a way of informing people. And also, I think that what I learned
I
through
see.
sociology is that clothing and fashion depicts tribes. It's something that um, you can use for protesting. There's so many different means through clothing. And I just found a huge identity through what I wore.
I
And so
gotcha.
I really enjoyed sociology, and then I applied it to my own personal life, which was how I was dressing.
I got okay, so that makes sense now. So it's a statement very much to you. It's very much a statement to you. So I feel like that makes a lot of sense with what you've told me about yourself, actually. Because you did mention that you are a dog rescuer, but you also design for the nonprofits,
Yeah,
well, for your nonprofit. And so we will get into that a little bit as well. But
right.
I do want to talk about Gosh, where was I going with this? I do
Mm.
want to talk about you also do quilting, right? Brianna, can we please see maybe some of his fashion design pieces just so people can get an idea of who he is as a fashion designer? I'd love to see that because some of your work, I love the photography behind it, and we'll see that in a second.
Thank
There
you.
we go. There we go. Is that a dog leash that I see?
Yeah, so this
Love it.
was yeah, so this is an orange ultra suede blazer, and then I created a camouflage with the imprint of my dog who inspired me, and so I created different levels of camo. And in this particular picture, I had just come back from Thailand. I was very inspired by the monks and the saffron robes that they wore. And so orange has become a big part of my inspiration. So this is a really fun picture. And this was on exhibit at the FIT Museum, Fashion Institute of Technology.
Oh, okay. How cool is that? Yes, this one too. I was curious about this one.
Thank you. So I got a grant from, oh gosh, from Lexus, and they were offering grants to different fashion designers who were working in the area and the space of sustainability. And so I created a group of clothing from upcycled wool blankets. And I love these wool blankets that have these stripes. They're called Hudson Bay blankets. So I created a grouping of different silhouettes with the blankets, and that actually, interestingly, I think was a precursor to my quilting. But I really love the graphic and how you can kind of play with something that is very traditional but make it your own.
And what do the colors mean in this pic in this
So
design?
I don't know exactly. Actually, I think the Hudson Bay blankets, I do believe that there's something. I think that they're Canadian, and I do think that they have something to do with the fur trade, which is
Mm,
ironic because I'm a fur anti-fur protester. But
yeah.
there is something about this particular color story, and I'm not sure. So that's a good question.
Okay. No, I'm curious about it because I saw the same colors in the last one, and I know that um statements and it sounds like symbolism behind everything you do is a big part of your work.
Mm.
But let's go ahead and see the next one.
Okay, cool.
This one.
So, into my career, a few years now. When I started my career, I was making basically anything that I wanted to make that I wanted to wear out that night. That was how I started to create clothing. Was clothing that I related to personally that I could wear out to the nightclub, whatever, as a young
Yeah.
person. But later on, I got much more inspired by and informed by animal advocacy and sustainability. And so I stopped using anything that had to do with animals and started using all plant based materials. And so this was a collection that I created that was all completely made out of linen, which is one of the most sustainable, most durable fabrics. And linen traditionally is very summer fabric, but I created sort of like a all year round collection, a lot of tailoring, linen shoes, shirts, ties. And this was maybe a little bit more of a conservative side for me, but I really enjoyed this collection.
Linen. Okay. Oh, this one.
Mhm. So
Love that
this was
jacket.
before, thank you. This was before I stopped using animals, and this was
Mm,
inspired by motorcycle jackets, as well as quilts. So this was a play on masculinity. This piece was at the Metropolitan Museum in the Met, which was of true honor that they used this. There was a show called Men in Skirts, so they used this outfit for that. And this was when I was doing full on sort of very heavy duty leather, which was part of my trademark for many, many years. And then at one point, I'm like, I don't want to work in this anymore. But it is quite an incredible material to work with.
leather is okay. And yeah, what an honor that is. Um, and yeah, can you tell me about this picture too?
Yeah, so I started in menswear. I studied menswear. I only did menswear, and then eventually I realized that the business is in women's wear and fashion, and that's where a big part those there's more opportunities in that space. And so I started a women's collection based on my menswear. And my first collection was worn by Janet Jackson, which was really, really cool.
Yeah.
And so I definitely dressed a lot of celebrities and again in my day, which was not my favorite thing to do, but that was again part of the game of being a fashion designer and dressing celebrities, going out a lot, um, things like that. But to be able to dress Janet was pretty cool.
Now, I want to look at maybe one more picture and then I want to get into that a little bit more. So, your thoughts on fashion design and that whole world, and then we can talk about how that ties in later. So this one, I wanted you to really explain this one because I'm loving
Oh,
the color scheme.
thank you. Well, it's I've decided that I mean, I'm obsessed with green, and all greens go together. And I've made a lot of quilts that are just all green, shades of green. We may show one later, but I there's something about green, and so this is in my living room in my little house up in the Hudson Valley,
Oh, okay.
and it's a like a green velvet couch, a green corduroy shirt, green corduroy pants. This was a cover shoot for a magazine that features people who live up in the Hudson Valley. And then an artist created this really beautiful woven vine wall hanging behind me. And it was a really fun picture.
Yeah, I'm loving that. But I do want to, oh, okay, let's do one more.
Yeah, this one
Okay.
great. So one of my muses is Alan Cumming, the actor and superstar, and so he's worn a lot of my clothes, and this was an outfit that I created especially for him, and it was again kind of playing with gender. This was an apron skirt that he wore. All everything was all in white. And this was for Harper's Bazaar magazine. So it was really, again, I feel like I've had some incredible opportunities in my career to do some cool stuff and meet some really
Yeah.
interesting people.
Yeah, and it really sounds like it. But I do want to talk about your views on the fashion industry.
Mm,
And so you mentioned before that it's very fast paced, right?
yes.
Is it right? And you have to collaborate with so many different people. Tell me, elaborate on that a bit more.
Absolutely. So the fashion industry, you had there's so many moving parts, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm teaching a course right now about manufacturing and production, and it brought me back to the struggles of actually creating a garment because it's not just one person sitting in a room. It can be, but a lot of it is me too. A lot of it is you have to rely on so many people. You have to rely on the pattern maker, the tailor, the knitter, the sewing people, the fabric mills arriving to the factory, the cutting. There's so many steps involved in
Mm-hmm.
a garment, uh, and things go wrong all the time. So it's like manufacturing and producing a collection uh, can be really tricky, and everything that goes wrong does go wrong. So I learned a lot through the years, but I found that while I liked to collaborate, absolutely, I also longed to do something that was just myself, that I could just do alone, and that's where sort of the quilting sort of came into play. But creating fashion, creating garments is a team sport.
Now, before we get more into the quilting, let's take a turn. How did you get into quilting? Because there was a huge event in your life that sort
Yes.
of catapulted that. So can you talk about that?
Sure. It's interesting because I've had quilts through my life. It's a very American type of thing that
It
somebody
is.
of, and and there's so much history and language around the world of quilting that
And
I think
again, that's the sociology interests that I'm seeing too.
it's so fascinating because I think that again, there's a lot of connection back to slavery. There's one of my favorite artists is a group of women down in Alabama called G's Bend, and they are descendants from slaves, and they create the most stunning, perfectly imperfect quilts that are hanging in the Tate Gallery in London. So there's a real art form there. And so, uh, gosh, so I was married to the love of my life, this great guy, also named John, and he was diagnosed, very healthy guy. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, he was diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer, and he was 54. This is now 9 years ago, and we did everything by the book, did all of the treatments and really just did everything. And after 16 months, he passed away. Um, and the as part of my grieving, I guess, and I did a lot of creative grieving, writing and groups and different things. But part of the grieving was that I bought a sewing machine, particularly a quilting machine. And I took all of John's red flannel shirts. He wore red plaid flannel shirts mostly. He was like kind of very outdoorsy guy, and I cut them up and made my first quilt. And that was really profound. It's still on my bed now. And I love the idea that quilting can be this process wherein you can use materials can have a soul, and where you can use materials that have a story, um, that could be very personal. But also, I love just the very traditional, simple quilting patterns, but using fabrics that speak to me.
That's such an interesting thing to say, though. The fabrics can have a soul,
Oh yeah.
which I can see that now. Brianna, can we see the quilt? And you said it's red flannel, right?
Oh,
So
I have that one. So unfortunately, I don't have a good picture of that. So we
okay.
show
Yeah,
this
that's okay.
this quilt was a little bit more creative, and it's enormous. It's for a king size bed, and it's camouflage fabric and strips, and then the border on the top and the bottom is cotton, is a black pinstripe suiting. So it's kind of hard to see, but it's very graphic. And again, it was a real labor of love, and it's an enormous quilt that
King size, yeah.
I have kind of folded up on my bed, and I'd like to sell it to raise money for my nonprofit. But again, it was a wonderful experiment in doing something without any real um, direction. I just started, and
You
that's
just
where
started. Now, you've said that quilting is the opposite of fashion for you.
it is.
What does that freedom from those external opinions unlock in your creativity?
Well, I think what I like, and I just want to talk about this piece just quickly, is that so I created a camouflage with my the image of my dog. So again, this is a very traditional. I think it's like a log cabin pattern,
Oh, I see the dogs.
some red plaid trimming, and this I sold at an auction. And this was maybe my second piece that I made. Again, what I like about quilting is that it's very meditative. It's me and the machine and the materials. And rather than making fashion or making clothes, where again you have to rely on a lot of people, and somebody has to try it on. And again, if it doesn't fit, then it's disappointing. That's also part of it, is that making clothes involves the customer, and sometimes that customer is not happy. So
Oh, that's so true.
and I used to have a retail store in the West Village in New York City, and I learned a lot about my customer. Creating a quilt uh, was something else that I just felt like, again, it's a very individual process.
Yeah, it's a very individual process, but
Yeah,
at least with the quilts, you don't have somebody trying it on and saying, "Oh, it doesn't fit me."
exactly. And I love about making quilts is that it's just me. A lot of times I have no
Mm,
real idea of what it's going to be. Like right now, I've cut a bunch of. I'm going to be working on it this weekend, just cutting tons of strips of fabric and just starting to sew them together and then see what reveals itself. And what the other thing I like about quilting is that it's a art piece, but it's also a functional piece. and so that it has that sort of it has value to it. Whereas sometimes clothing can just be something that certainly can cover your body, but a lot of times fashion is can feel a little just one level or kind of surfacey.
And but that's so true though, because it's functional, yes, but it gives you warmth too. And I just feel like something that's just handmade, that's just so close to your heart, it does more than just give you warmth, and not to sound too cheesy, but it gives you love.
Absolutely.
And,
Yeah. So
um,
then this quilt is made out
yeah.
of like eight or I don't know, 8 to 10 or so different shades of green. Again, a very simple pattern. It's kind of hard to see it here, but it's my napping blanket. And again,
Oh, lovely.
what I love is that I throw it in the washing machine, I throw it in the dryer. It's very durable. It was a real pleasure to make.
So lovely. I love the what you can do with all these greens.
Yeah, me too.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So let's talk about the flow state, I guess. What does that feel like to you? Can you describe the flow state as because I've heard some people describe it as meditation. Is that kind of what it is for you?
It's definitely meditation. It's well, it brings me into myself.
Mm,
It feels very creative, and when I'm really feeling that kind of creativity, time does stop, and I feel like I'm right in the middle of my dharma in a way, and it brings me great joy. There's just something about it. It wipes away everything else, and it's like a puzzle. And I think that
mhm.
are kind of puzzle like. So a lot of it is like, how does this fit here? And is it, how did all of these pieces fit together? I love doing puzzles. So to me, quilting is sort of a big
I
puzzle.
like that. Yeah, and I can see that too as an artist because I sort of like to create my own create my own problems in
Yeah.
real life and in my art, but also I can at least solve these problems when it comes to the art process and
Yeah.
so I can definitely relate to that, I think. Um okay. So, oh my goodness, where was I going with this? Lost my state of mind. Um
We were talking about the flow, about meditation.
meditation. I want to talk about you have mentioned about mentioned your process of recovery, okay? Can you describe what that was like and sort of like the time period of that too?
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned in the earlier, I did grow up in an alcoholic home. So alcohol was a disruptive aspect of my home life. And as a child, I just remember saying like, I will never be that person.
Mm,
And my dad was a great guy, but when he drank, it just caused a lot of turmoil in the home and discomfort and chaos. And I couldn't, but as a teenager, I couldn't wait to drink. I couldn't wait to smoke grass. I couldn't wait to smoke cigarettes. I was precocious and wanted to do it all. And I found that, through the years, of course, I'd enjoyed a glass of wine or a beer or a joint or whatever. But in my kind of later 40s, I started to notice that I was drinking a lot more. It was definitely a disease. It was definitely a progressive disease. And I started to notice that I was having more days where I was waking up hungover, that I was thinking more about alcohol and drinking, and it became problematic. And yet, at the same time, I started to think, well, this is just what my life is going to be like. I kind of resigned myself to the fact that I don't want to stop drinking. So I'm just going to kind of live a life half lived. And after John died, I was able to basically shut the door and just drink. And I had a life where I could still working, but I worked a lot from home. But I would open up a bottle of wine, I would drink that, and then I'd wake up in the morning hungover, take some ibuprofen, maybe half a Xanax, and it was all self-medicating. And then until one day, and I knew I had a problem, but I didn't want to admit it or acknowledge it. And I would stop here and there, but I always found myself back drinking because I
mm,
program. But one day I woke up and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. It was a shocking kind of night that scared me. and embarrassed me. And I thought, I can't do this anymore. So I called my therapist. She said, is there someone that you know that can take you to a 12-step meeting? And I knew many people. And I went to a meeting, and it was in Times Square, New York City, totally out of central casting above a tattoo parlor. It was almost like a film set. And I just sat there and cried. And I was crying. I had tears of relief and tears of fear and tears of sadness. I was mourning a life that was walking away from, and that was almost 7 years ago. So I really dived into my sobriety, and it's been truly the missing link in my spiritual life. And I have a sponsor. I have a sponsee. I'm a very satisfied customer, and but have worked hard. And the beautiful thing about sobriety and being clean is that um, what the greatest gift was that I no longer feel guilty or ashamed. That went away right away, and that was definitely connected to my drinking. And the other thing is that it allowed me to make amends to people. It allowed me to make amends to myself. It allowed me to get really honest. And that's beautiful work that anybody, sober or not sober, can appreciate.
I feel like it's so hard to forgive yourself for whatever it is that you're mourning. I guess mourning is not quite the word for it, but forgiving yourself is probably one of the best, in my opinion, one of the best gifts you can give yourself. And it sounds like you really went through a whole process to get to that point. And um forgiveness, are there any other kind of emotions you went through? Any other things um that you were surprised to have found in recovery?
Well, it's interesting. There's a lot of promises that are spoken
Mm.
about in recovery. But for me, I think it was and has been just this very simple experience of when I put my head on my pillow at night, I smile because
Oh,
I don't have bed spins. I've had a very, very full day. I feel like my days are, now that I'm sober, like my days are jam packed. I feel like I live 10 years in each day. It can be very tiring, but it's kind of exciting. And so just to have that experience of laying my head on my pillow, knowing that I've had a very full day, that I've been the best person that I can be, even though again I'm human and I make a lot of mistakes, and then waking up in the morning and not being hungover, like those are true gifts of revelation that I never thought was possible.
honestly, it sounds like to anyone who hasn't gone through that kind of change, it can be such a simple thing, just waking up and feeling, awake. I'm awake because it's my day. But
Yeah.
you've gone through so much to actually be grateful for these moments, these amazing moments. And it's true, you are only human. Let's talk about dogs now.
Uh,
Let's talk about dogs because I also want to hear a little bit more about Tiny Tim. Who was Tiny
sure.
Tim to you? How did you get into dog rescue?
So I grew up with dogs, but I never really. It just something happened at a certain point in my life, and I think it was actually when I turned 40. I'm like, okay, I want to adopt. I want to go to the shelter and adopt a dog. And I went to this shelter, and I was looking for a little dog that I could travel with, and there was this big pit bull mix. Um, and in the kennel, and he was the only dog that wasn't barking or jumping. He was just sitting there, and he almost hypnotized me. It was really profound. And his name was Tiny Tim, and he was a three-legged pit bull mix, and he had lost his leg on Christmas Eve, and he was the shelter favorite, and they called him Tiny Tim again because he had lost his leg on Christmas Eve, and I couldn't think of a better name.
Oh,
He changed my life, and because he was missing a leg, he would have he couldn't really just saunter down the street. We had to almost run, and it was always like such a sight to see him coming towards somebody. And he changed my life in many ways. And when he died, I started a foundation in his name called the Tiny Tim Rescue Fund, because I had started to volunteer at the city shelter in New York in Harlem. And it still is a pretty rough place where there's a lot of euthanasia and overpopulation. And while I was volunteering, I met some incredible women doing rescue who had these groups, and they basically said if we had more money, we could save more dogs. We could have more dogs in uh, foster homes, and we could vet them and get them trained, et cetera. So I started to raise money through my nonprofit, and I started to create clothing. So in this picture, my hoodie, that's Tiny Tim, not in the picture with me, but he kind of looked like that. But Tiny Tim, the icon, the logo is on the hoodie there. And so I just started to create clothing and products and dog leashes and whatever I could think of to raise money and also to feed my creative soul, because I love to create product, and bridge those two worlds. And so I started to volunteer at different shelters. This is from Yonkers Shelter in New York. And eventually, the Tiny Tim Rescue Fund is now, I don't know, 12 years old. Tiny Tim died about 12 years ago. And I've been just getting deeper and deeper into that world of how can I be of service to the homeless population of dogs and also the communities of people who may not be able, who really would like to keep their dog but can't afford to. It's very connected, and so I've learned a ton about just all the different ways that we can help the shelter community.
I do have a question from Alexa, actually.
Yeah.
Um, so has recovery and working your program changed your creativity or your creative process?
Mhm. That's such a great question, and it goes back
Yeah.
to, so I had a friend, I had a buddy who, and he was also a creative designer. We would love smoking grass, and I always thought like if I'm going to be creative, I got to get stoned first so I can sketch, and it's going to be more fun, and I'm going to be more creative, and but half the time I'd probably fall asleep, or it was always just it would go off the rails, and I was afraid that once I got sober, that my creative life would die and
Oh, yeah.
be able to access.
Uh-huh.
And but my creative life now, it feels more connected because I feel like I'm more in my body, and um, it is different. But I feel like I absorb a lot. Like I love going to museums. I love looking at art. I love looking at work. I feel like now I'm able to really absorb a lot of what's coming at me, the external influences, the external inspirations, and then I think my own creative process. Um, I'm certainly enjoying it more. It's not so tortured, and it's not so. I'm not doing it for others. And I think that
Oh.
part of what my one of the gifts of my husband's passing was that I did not want to be a people pleaser anymore. And that was a big takeaway and a wake up call. And so I feel like now as a sober man, that rings even more true.
And honestly, I feel like being sober, I would have to imagine that maybe you feel like you fit in your shoes a little bit better too, or a lot better too, because you're not you're more connected with your body, like you mentioned. Um, okay, yeah, that's amazing. I had a question for you too. I really love that you also work with other organizations as well. So can you tell me a little bit about the other work that you do with those other nonprofits?
Absolutely. So when I first started creating product for the Tiny Tim Rescue Fund, I was working with really cool people that were screen printing my product or making product, and it was great. But then I met this woman who started a nonprofit called Unshattered, and Unshattered is in Poughkeepsie, New York, and it's a woman who came from IBM, and she started this nonprofit basically to help women thrive in recovery. And these are women that are coming from pretty rough backgrounds, rough stories. And she teaches them how to sew and how to design accessories and bags. And she's created this incredible phenomenon of these women in recovery. And they've had a very high success rate because she's given them a skill set as well as confidence. And she also provides a lot of other um, kind of mentoring and other things outside of just learning how to make a bag that has really helped these women to really grow into themselves. And so when I met the Unshattered people, I'm like, I want to make bags with you all because I can make bags anywhere, but I'd rather make it with women in recovery because it feels more purposeful. And that's when I started to think about this idea of design with purpose and purposeful design and really just these companies that are much more what's the word I'm looking for, social enterprises. So I started working
Yes.
with the women in recovery. So I have a whole line of bags: yoga bags, tote bags, stop kits, makeup bags, book bags that I make with these women in recovery, and I sell these bags for my nonprofit that's on my website. So what's cool is that it's a win-win. It's helping these women survive and thrive in recovery, which is meaningful to me on a personal level. But then I'm also creating bags that have my Tiny Tim camouflage, so it's very branded and creative for me. And then I'm able to sell it and raise money for rescue. And then the other group that I work with, also really meaningful, is a group called Spectrum Designs, and I was looking for a screen printer, and a friend said, "You really need to check these people out." So it's a gentleman that started a company to bring employment to people who are living on the spectrum or who have autism. And so 70% of the workforce of Spectrum Design are people living on the spectrum or with autism. And they screen print, they embroider, they do all of these different types of promotional types of processes that companies can come and say, I need all these t shirts printed, or I need a tote bag done, or a baseball hat. So I create my t shirts, my sweatshirts, and my baseball caps with Spectrum Design. And again, to me, it's so cool because it's another win-win. And while I could do my T-shirts and my baseball hats probably much cheaper, it brings much more satisfaction to me to know that not only am I raising money for rescue, but I'm also supporting a community that may not always have the opportunities. And
Exactly.
so I'm always looking again for other organizations, nonprofits, companies that are doing that type of social enterprise or that type of purpose driven design that I can collaborate with.
It sounds like this isn't like you've tapped into an entire ecosystem of helping one another, purpose-driven missions, and you have your goals that you set out to do, and you are able to work with these other organizations and I guess have that purpose behind that extra layer of meaning behind what you're doing. And so I just as you were describing all of that in my head, I'm envisioning like some sort of do you remember seeing those diagrams in school of what is it, the cloud? Where am I going with this? Either recycling, like where you have like the arrows
Yeah,
feeding into another section, into another section. It's an entire ecosystem.
yeah,
Um, but there's so much love to give out there. Not to sound too cheesy again, okay? But it just sounds like this idea of helping other people feeds into your soul. And I absolutely believe that what you put out there into the world, you get right back. And it's so healing for your soul to be able to give back to other people and put all of these good thoughts and good feelings just out into the world. Um, so let's talk about Tiny Tim a little bit more, okay? What made him your soul dog?
I think that I mean, he was so special. He came into my life at a certain point. I was turning 40. I was single. I was at a certain point to my life when I was kind of finally, almost in a strange way, stepping into my own manhood.
Mhm.
But it was also the fact that this is the first time that I was caring for something else, somebody else.
Okay.
Relationships. I certainly had parents and siblings, but a lot of my earlier life was very self-centered and self-motivated. And this was the first time that I really had somebody relying on me that needed me. And so it changed. I mean, my life changed overnight having a dog because you have to be responsible. And he taught me a lot about that. He taught me a lot about certainly unconditional love. And it was a true, I mean, he really is like my hairy soulmate. He lives in my heart. And I remember after he died and I was starting to volunteer at the city shelter in Harlem, and I was really scared because I was nervous. I'd been in shelters before, but I had not been in a kill shelter. I was really nervous to go, and just knowing that not all these dogs were going to make it out alive. And I was walking up the street in Harlem. It was a winter night. It was like early December. And I imagined Tiny Tim running alongside of me. And he had died maybe a month ago before that. And I was imagining him walking along the side of me. And as we got to the shelter, I imagined him jumping up into my heart and curling into my heart like he was curling into his little bed. And so he lives there. And that was a very beautiful kind of visual, very and visceral moment for me. And he
See.
he still lives on. And I've had many dogs since him, and I've had a lot of wonderful dogs. I've got my three-legged Chihuahuas laying on the bed with me right now, but each dog brings something different.
Do you ever spend time with dogs individually in the shelter just to kind of spend time with them?
I do, yes. So I've started I try to visit as many shelters as I can. I'd like to try to network the dogs, maybe do a video about them, especially longer term dogs,
Mm.
longer term stays, to try to get them wherever, try to get them more exposure. But when I go to shelters, I do really want to connect with the dogs. And what I have found is that even though I'll go walk dogs, even though they're going to spend the majority of their time in their kennel, if I can have that 15 minutes with them and we can bond and they can feel that love. I feel like there's something enriching in that. But I'd like to spend time getting to know the dogs, and it helps me to maybe help them find a home, because when a dog's in a shelter, they're not themselves.
Yeah, they're not. No.
Very hard. I mean, it's a very stressful, chaotic, awful place to be, and it's rare that they um, are going to be able to show well. And so that's why we try to get them out into a foster home where they can decompress and be a dog again in a home. But it's there's always a happy story, even though it's a heartbreaking environment. There's always like
Mm.
a happy story of a dog that got out and found a great home, and that's what keeps me going.
I have to know though, how do you not take them all home?
No.
How?
I fall in love all the time. I mean, I'm just
Yeah.
falling in love, and it is hard. My dog is not super dog friendly, and also
Mm.
right now I'm spending a lot of time on airplanes traveling back to Ohio to see my 91-year-old mom. And so little Rudy, my Chihuahua, is the perfect companion for this time in my life. But I do have a fantasy, as I think many people do, of having, 10 dogs, 20 dogs,
Yep.
and we've all
Mhm.
those videos of people who have like all of these dogs in a big sanctuary. And that is a fantasy. And someday I'd like to be able to do that, because I do meet dogs all the time in shelters. And I'm like, I just want to bring you home with me. And I have to say no. And sometimes it's like Sophie's choice. I can't save this one, but I can save that one.
I have to tell you, it's been my dream to run a cat shelter for years. Cats, but then also I also love rats too. Uh,
Yeah.
all animals deserve deserve our love, deserve an amazing, a good home, a shelter, love. They all deserve that. And so how can you not want to take them all home? Well, I want to talk about, you recently had a trip to Louisiana.
Yeah.
And so you were making room in a different shelter. What was that about?
So a friend of mine has a rescue group, and she was starting to network these dogs in a rural part of Louisiana, Lafayette. And my foundation was helping kind of pay for their transport and their boarding and their vet bills. And I got to meet one of them. She brought him to my apartment or to my neighborhood one day, Danny. And Danny had come from a kill shelter. He was about to be euthanized, and I was able, through my foundation, to sponsor him. And she brought him to meet me, and I'm like, oh my gosh! And so to actually get to meet the dog that we were able to help was a turning point. And I said to Suzanne, let's go down and let's meet these people. And, it's great that we can, pull these dogs off the list, but let's go meet the people behind, they're doing the heavy lifting. And so
That's
we
important too.
yeah. And so we've gone now 3 times to Lafayette, Louisiana. And what I've learned is that while I'd like to be able to help a lot of communities and go visit a lot of other places, if I can just dig deeper into one community and again build out a network of people that are on the ground there that can help me get a few more dogs out in that area, the better. So I just came back from Louisiana a couple weeks ago, and we visited about 4 different very rural shelters that are held together with scotch tape and hairspray. I mean,
As they
it's
usually are. Yeah.
it's
Lots
pretty
of them.
compared to like the shelters that I see in New York City. But anyway, beautiful people running them, really doing the best they can, no money, and dogs everywhere, strays every
Mhm.
people dumping dogs and great dogs. So Monday night, so there's a lot of dogs that I had met that we left behind. Monday night, we got kind of the youth command that they were going to be killing 6 of the 12 dogs in this one shelter, and 2 of the dogs I had really bonded with. And I'm like, we can't let that happen. And so we basically, and I say we because it's a group of us kind of working all together. We worked late into the night, and finally we were able to secure the 2 dogs that were on the youth list that I had fallen in love with, Moose and Dean. A shelter up north had said we'll take them, and it's a non-kill shelter. And then there were 2 sets of 5 puppies each again, so we were able to free up 4 kennels of 12. And so there was no euthanasia that day. And so now the hard work begins, because now I'm trying to get them all to the vet, get the health certificates, find a transport, get them up here. And it's very financially draining, kind of scary, because it's, again, relying on a lot of people, because I'm not there. But it was a really wonderful, I was crying Monday night because I couldn't believe that this was happening, that there was a shelter and a rescue up near me in Hudson Valley that said, yeah, we'll take them.
Think I'd be sobbing the whole way if I was you.
I
You're
mean,
gonna get good homes.
I,
Well, I do have a question from Rick too. How does giving to 4 legs differ from giving to 2 legs?
good question.
A good question, yeah.
Yeah, that is. I feel like, I mean, there's something again with animals, that unconditional love. And I feel like when I look into their eyes, whether it's a cat, a dog, any animal, that when they look back at you, you're seeing, as you can use a different word, but I'm seeing God coming through them. Like they are pure. There's a purity there. And so it's just that gosh, just to be able to help an animal who's also helpless, and his voice, it's being the voice of the voiceless. It's a very kind of natural thing, I think, that we all relate to. But then also giving to people, um I find that in my sobriety that talking to my sponsor or meeting people in a meeting that might need help, or really even again, New York is such an amazing place because there's people on the street all the time, and there's always something going on, and there's always people that need something or need help across getting across the street or whatever. There's a lot of human interaction in New York City that just really I find very enriching.
Now, that actually leads into another question I had. How does, I guess, stepping into this, what would you call this, access service role, this caregiver, I guess, helper role, caregiving role, however you want to look at it, how has that changed the way you walk through the world now?
That's a great question. So um if I had all the money in the world, I would do a lot of different. I would do a lot of things that I have a fantasy about, whether it's having an animal sanctuary, whether it's creating something that is giving back to both people and to dogs, etc. But I'm not in that place, and I have a full time job, and I'm working, and that's I mean that's very demanding. So the rescue work is something that I'm doing on the side. Um, but I have a dream of being able to do this full time, and I just it's funny, like I read quotes all the time about when death comes for you, make sure you're alive, like just living
Ooh, that's a good one.
living that full life every day. And I think there's maybe something from Pope Francis, but it was a quote about just this idea of don't wait, like live that life that you want to live now, do those things you want to do now. And I think that certainly the takeaway that I had when John was sick and when he died was it was a wake up call. And I find this whenever somebody I love dies, it's always a wake up call about,
Mhm.
dude, none of us are getting out of this. None of us are going to get out of this alive, and it's time um, to cut through the noise and do the thing that you love to do.
Now, I was actually going to ask, do you carry these ideas into your schooling? Because you did mention you do work full time and you also teach too. For I guess, what do you teach, and do you teach these I these ideas of giving back? And go ahead.
A little bit, yeah. So I'm working at Parsons School of Fashion in New York City right now, and so I teach a graduate program right now in manufacturing and production, but through the lens of sustainability, through the lens of a circular supply chain and something that's creating more meaningful product. And I'm actually giving a lecture on Monday about purpose-driven design and social.
There we go.
So
There we go.
and these students love that, they're right there with us, with all of those conversations. So I try to, and I do a lot of, I meet with students all the time, and I do get a lot out of that, because I can share all of my mistakes and things that all the things that I've done wrong that maybe they can learn from.
I Yeah, I feel like there's so many people out there who want to know how they can give back, how they can help, how they can use their skills, just to do something that's more fulfilling, something that's a little bit bigger than themselves. Can you tell us a little bit about the grant funding process for Tiny Tim Rescue Foundation?
Sure. So on my website, I've worked with somebody who understands how to create these digital links and stuff. But on my website, there's a link to apply for grants if you have a nonprofit, a 501(c)(3), specifically for dogs, but sometimes for cats. And so I'm able to give away money when I have it. So last year I gave away around $9,000 of grant money. It was really exciting to do that. But one of the things that just to the point of giving back, um, and I heard this. This was somebody had mentioned this in a memorial service, but basically, we all have a like a divine assignment, And a big part of, I think, one's life, or at least for me, is like, is trying to figure out what is that divine assignment. And we all have different ways of giving back. And my father told me very early on, because I wanted to be a social worker, because I wanted to give back right out of college. And he said, when you find the thing that you love doing, that you have a passion for, you'll be able to give back in a much bigger way, because it's really coming from, through you in a creative way. And I feel like we all have a divine assignment that we're here to experience and to manifest. And it's different ways of giving back.
Now that actually leads into my next question, which would be for anybody who might be thinking, oh, maybe they do want to give back somehow, they just don't know how they can. What would you say to those people?
I
What would
think,
Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
that's a good question. Like, my nephew just reached out to me. He's like, I want to work in shelters. I want to do this. And I'm like, okay, well, here's all of your links. And, but you got to do the work. You got to kind of carve out that time and show up. And again, I think there's so many different ways. And I think that and I know my friends who are cancer survivors, as an example. Again, I think that they feel this appreciation for life that is in itself a huge gift. And when you have that perspective, I think it feels just more natural to give back. And again, find those ways. But it can be, giving back is like, taking care of your mom, taking care of your child, taking care of your dog. Again, just smiling at somebody on the street. There's so many different ways that are free. But there are, like, I always recommend, like, look in your community. And I think right now, because we're going through a tough time. At least I think. Anyway, I'm going through a tough time. But to me, if I can find ways in my community to give back, then I feel like I'm, doing something.
And it sounds like it doesn't need to be some big grand gesture, anything big. Uh, I find that sometimes these smallest gestures, the smallest things that you can do that are easy for you, readily available to you, sometimes can have the biggest impact too.
Absolutely.
Well, John, it is time, and I cannot thank you enough for joining us tonight, and sharing everything. Honestly, sharing your life, everything that you know about healing yourself, sharing your heart, your honesty, your wisdom. I feel like your story reminds us that healing and purpose can take lots of forms,
Oh, yeah.
and that might be helping others get find the path back to themselves, whatever that might look like. So again, thank you. I
My
really appreciate you coming on. And thank you to the Marsh as well for having ANCAN on and letting us give these interviews and share John's story. Thank you for the Marsh. And if you would like to donate to the tip jar, please feel free to donate to the tip jar. I think that's it. Please, if you guys want to know a little bit more about ANCAN, we've got a fancy little mug here. ANCAN. We are
uh,
a support group. You can find us online. Brianna, go ahead and take it over. Thanks, John.